Hello, so this is how I draw dragons. I usually start with very basic shapes for baselines, usually 3 circles, so one for the head, one for the chest, and one for the butt. For the legs, it is very similar, just with ovals. Let me just reshape this here. There we go. Yeah, so ovals and one smaller kind of semicircle shape, I don't really know, just scribble for the foot, just so you know where it is. Now for the tail and wing, it's just like very simple lines, and I usually use a rectangular box-like shape for the snout. Depends on what kind of dragon you're drawing. For the details for the snout, I usually do this like squiggly, sharp line, a lot of sharp angles. Dragons are just a whole lot of sharp angles. Now for the eye, it's kind of this teardroppy shape. Depending on what kind of dragon you're drawing, it can be really anything. The nose is a very similar teardroppy shape, and then I connect to the mouth. For the neck, I draw this like squiggly, sharpy thing. For the back of the neck, it's a lot more smooth, just smooth all the way down. Alright, now moving on to the legs. So for the legs, you very much follow the baselines very similarly. You just kind of block it in a bit more. I usually draw a tiny bit of a curve, which is where the elbow is. And then I draw another slight curve where I suppose that would be the ankle or the wrist. For the claws, I usually just, unless I'm trying to go super detailed, I usually just draw it the same as I would draw paws. Very simple, very quick to sketch. And I draw these little box-like shapes. Those are scales, but that's more of a stylistic choice. You don't have to do that. I just find those add more to the arms so they're not so naked looking. Now for the body, you do a very similar shape to the neck, very smooth. For the back legs, they're slightly different than the front. If you look at something like a horse or a wolf, you see that they curve in a different way. Think of like the way your arm bends, and that's kind of how their legs bend. So pretty much the same as the front, just slightly different. For the tail, you just kind of block it in, usually thicker at the base, and then you thin it out as you go along, depending on what type of dragon you're drawing. Moving on to the wings, I usually start with a thicker, like arm-like thing. They're very similar to arms, just a little different. So you draw your thicker arm and then the thinner part of your arm, very similar to a bat. For the claws, it's usually, I draw like an M shape, like a bird almost, and then 2 lines connected like a mountain on top. And then the claw is just kind of like a semicircle triangle-y thingy. It depends entirely on what you want it to do. I'm gonna have to shrink that down a bit. They're usually small. They're about the same size as you would draw the dragon's toes, so don't make them too big or it'll look kind of weird. Don't do what I did. Now for the wings, for the actual, I believe it's called membrane of the wings, I usually start with drawing these fingery parts. I usually do 3 or 4, and then I connect through there and connect the final part of it to the tail or the back, depending on what dragon I'm drawing. I prefer to do the tail, but it's sometimes easier to do it to the back for animation, especially because of all the angles you have to draw it at. So it depends, like, it's all about style, but if you're thinking specifically for anatomy, technically the tail would make more sense. Now this part is strictly stylized. It's something that bats have, so I mainly just added in to add that touch of realism, but you don't have to do that. It's just kind of something I do. For the head, for this example, I'll be doing an ice wing, for the first example at least. Ice wings have very, like, sharp features. They're from Wings of Fire, by the way. Very sharp features, so you put in all these sharp little spikes, and they're very flat. They're very flat looking. You gotta put in all of the sharp spikes, the long, sharp horns. I'm saying sharp a lot. They don't move or twist. They're not very angular, or they are very angular, sorry. Now, for the second example, I'll be doing my own species of dragons. For these guys, you can do really any horn. I usually do these, like, squiggly ones. They have big ears, these little cheek horns, and then they usually have big, thick, spikes on their necks and then a big horn on their snout. So now just gotta block in all these final details. Usually what I do is I start with the stomach, which is just kind of a little line there, and then I do these like triangular shaped spikes all down the back and on the head and down the tail. You can do these in any shape. I just choose to stick to triangular because it's easier to pay attention to, and it's better to just, I don't know, just try to stick to very basic shapes. That's the main advice I can give, because it might seem weird in premise, but the more basic the shape, the easier it will be to figure out how to draw a thing, because really everything is made up of basic shapes. Anyways, here you go. Now you have a very rough sketch of a dragon. I hope this tutorial was helpful, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye-bye!